What's up, beautiful people? Welcome into another edition of Chat It Up Sports. It is currently a Tuesday. I know the date says otherwise on the screen, but we recorded this on Monday. We are here. I'm your host, Greg Larnard. We've got Joseph Guthrie in the background. First and foremost, before we get into anything here, I do want to say a quick shout out to our boy Chase Green and Hannah Green. They had their first child. Gracie Lee Green has just graced her presence, her presence to the world yesterday on Monday. So I want to give a quick shout out to our boy CG. He is now an official member of the Hot Dads Club. So there's that. We got a lot of college football to get into. We're going to get into some NFL as well. But like I said, a lot of college football. And there's really no better place to go when we want to talk college football than Pro Football Focus. And speaking of PFF, they've got you covered all season long with the best data, tools, and analysis in the game. Sign up for PFF Plus today to unlock all their famous player grades and premium stats. Push to the playoffs in your fantasy league with in-season tools and award-winning rankings from fantasy expert Nathan Janke. And stay connected to the next generation of talent with the best NFL draft coverage on the planet. No matter what you're looking for, PFF Plus has what you need to make winning decisions all season long. Sign up for PFF Plus today for less than $10 a month. Joining us now is the host of the PFF College Football Show. He is a personal best friend of the Paul Feinbaum, and a very, very proud Syracuse football fan this season and this season alone. Our very good buddy, Mr. Max Chadwick, joins the show once again. Find him on Twitter at CFB Max Chadwick. Yes, he has been hacked, but his account is back, and he's back on Chatt It Up. What's up, Max?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on. Yes, my Twitter did get hacked because I'm a grade A moron. But I do want to shout out Chase, though, for the baby. That's awesome. I remember I went on a couple times ago, I think. It was him on, and he was saying how he's really looking forward to being a dad, but also a tiny part of him is not looking forward to it because he can't play college football 25 anymore after that, pretty much. So that took away from him, but I'm sure he's living the life right now, and I'm just want to shout out him. That's awesome news. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he's on cloud nine right now, and I would be surprised if he didn't have little Gracie Lee sitting on his lap and he's just on the sticks there playing as well while Mama's taking a nap or something along those lines. Would not.
Yeah, he probably is honestly. Like anything at like 3 a.m. Like when she's like, "Oh, can you handle this one?" He's like, "Yeah, I'll do it." And then he's
I got it.
He's the babe on the lap, and bottle in her mouth, and he's just playing college football. He's leading Kennesaw State to a dynasty at 4 o'clock in the morning. Yeah,
or maybe Syracuse and Kyle McCord. Who knows?
Maybe. Hopefully.
Well, with Joseph, what's going on with you, man? I know, but when we were pre-show, you and Max were out there nerding out with some college football. So I'm really excited that it's me and you on the show today. I'm going to ask my Vols questions. I'm going to get that out of the way, and then I'm going to just let you guys just absolutely roll and dive in college football, and I'll interject every once in a while. But how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's Texas week, so the blood pressure's high. The stomach's a little queasy, and I got some tools on deck to kind of help mitigate what is coming down the pipe. So yeah, we're just batten down the hatches and prep for Austin. So
there's a lot of different things going on there. Things coming down the pipe. You're battening up the hatches. You're talking about feeling queasy. I don't know what's going on over there in the Guthrie household. How does this feel compared to how you felt with Alabama week?
So preseason, this was the game I thought we were going to lose. So watching what I've watched over the course of the season, that mindset has not changed. So I'm just kind of mentally preparing myself, kind of thinking, if I could plot out a path for Georgia to win this game, I'm trying to do that. And I just not coming up with a whole lot, because what I've seen over the past few weeks, the inconsistencies on offense, the inconsistencies on defense, definitely a little scared. So.
Yeah, well, we will get into that for sure with Max here, and hopefully he can help us build a bridge to a winning formula for you and the rest of the Bulldog Nation here this coming weekend. Tennessee's got their own problems as they're getting ready to face the aforementioned Crimson Tide of Alabama. But before we talk about that, let's kind of rewind a little bit and talk about the 23-17 overtime nail-biting win over the dreaded Florida Gators. So, Max, right off the top, I've got to ask just real quick. We've talked about it on the last couple of podcasts. I just really want to get your take on it because you're more of the expert than me. Not probably Joe, maybe not Joseph, but definitely me. But what's wrong with this Tennessee offense that you see? Is it Nico? Is it the O-line? Is it Heupel? A combination of everything? What is your trained college football eye telling you about this Tennessee offense that's just a little bit off over the last couple of weeks?
I think it is a little bit of everything. I think I would mainly look at Nico though, because this offense is so predicated on deep throws, and he's just not hitting them right now. Right? I think the deep accuracy has been leaving a lot to be desired as of right now. He is one of the lowest graded quarterbacks in the country under pressure this year. He wasn't great when he was kept clean against Florida either. There's just a lot of worrying signs right now. Now, listen, he's still supremely talented. I still have a lot of faith in this kid going forward. He's still a very, very young kid as well. But as of right now, as of this second, he's leaving some things out there, and you want to see more efficient play from him. So we'll see if he can get right against Alabama, who has their own issues in their secondary. But yeah, I think mainly it's due to Nico. It's due to that offense just kind of being so predicated in that one thing that he can't do right now. So it's not like he's got opportunities to be good in other areas, because really it's just run the ball, it screens, and it's deep shots, and the deep shots just aren't there right now, which makes everything else that much harder for the Tennessee offense. So yeah, I think it's a little bit on him right now. I want to see if he can get better the second half of the season.
Yeah, it's kind of looking like a reincarnation of Joe Milton out there. He's just overthrowing guys, wrong shoulder. Like even the short throws, like he would just throw to the wrong shoulder and a guy would have to like make a lunging catch and then he can't run after the catch. And you're right, like that's not stuff that we saw from Nico early on in the year. And I understand that the competition wasn't the same, but the throws are still pretty similar in terms of the ones that he has to make. And I think you're right, he's just not making them right now. Let's go right over to the other side of the football quick. And a guy that when you first joined us for the first time on Chatt It Up Sports, you said this guy has an opportunity to be the number one overall pick in this upcoming draft. James Pierce Jr. There was basically an APB out for him. I didn't really know where he was over the first month or so of the season, but he's beginning to make his presence felt a little bit more. Talk to me about him specifically, what you've seen out of him and how he's been able to be more effective over the last couple of weeks from where he was early on in the season.
Yeah, I was diving into the numbers late last night when I was writing some things up, and I was surprised to find that James Pierce Jr. is actually leading the nation in pressure rate this year. But wow. The one thing I will say, though, he's not that good in pass rush win rate, which I think is a better stat to look at, because a lot of his pressures are coming off cleanup and unblocked pressures right now. So he's not necessarily winning one-on-one like he was last year. But I will say for him, what he has improved a lot at is his run defense. He's gotten a lot better as a run defender this year, when last year that was kind of his kryptonite. He was one of the best pass rushers in college football last year, but his run defense left a lot to be desired because he's not a very big edge defender, and he still has not that big. I don't know if he put on any weight this year, but he's playing a lot stronger against the run, which is his biggest negative coming out. Now, if you hopefully you can see the pass rushing start to look a lot like last year, combine that with the much improved run defense, then you start to talk about, a guy that can go top 5, top 10 in the NFL draft. But the pass rushing still isn't there quite yet. The numbers pressure-wise are there. But like I said, he's not really winning one-on-one as quickly as he was last year. But if he can get better like he did last year, then I think we'll start talking about him again as a top 5, top 10 pick. But right now, he's probably more like a guy that I would take in the first round solidly, not the guy that probably is the number one overall contender right now.
Another guy on that defense that is dealing with some issues, and Keenan Peely, I think he's like 26, 24 years old, an older guy that's been in college for a while. He's been around a while. And unfortunately, he tore his ACL in that game against Florida, so he's going to be out the rest of the season. We saw Arian Carter came up with a big play in that game against Florida. Who are some of those other guys at the linebacker spot that you're kind of pinpointing that you think have to step up there for Tennessee? Because Peely's been really good, and I know they were really excited to have him back for another year this year.
Yeah, it's definitely a big loss for them, right? I mean, he's a guy that was having a pretty good year for them before that. So, yeah, you said Arian Carter, Jeremiah Tillander, and Caleb Perry, excuse me. Those are other guys that I think will step up. But, yeah, Keenan Peely is definitely a guy that was a really good player in that defense game as well. Tennessee's run defense has been outstanding this year. I mean, they've really been one of the best in the country at defending the run, not just James Pierce Jr., it's everyone from the edge rushers, the D tackles, the linebackers, even the guys in the secondary are helping support that run defense. But yeah, that's a big time loss for them in that defense. But I still think they have some guys behind him that could that help him out after this injury.
Yeah, they do have a little bit of depth there on the defense, so that'll be interesting. Now let's kind of move forward. I know, personally, as a show, we're going to talk and dive more into this matchup, but I really want to get your thoughts on Alabama and how Tennessee fans should be feeling heading into this matchup with Alabama. We know it's at Neyland Stadium. That's going to be huge, but it feels like both of these programs are in weird spots. They both have a couple of weird losses 2 weeks ago, obviously against Vanderbilt with Alabama and then Arkansas with Tennessee. And then they escape lesser opponents this week in the SEC with South Carolina and Florida. So I guess how should both fan bases be feeling going into this matchup with their teams and their programs not really playing up to what feels like their potential?
They should feel like this is a playoff game because it really might be, honestly. I think that you look at these two schools, and yeah, you mentioned it. I mean, that's really the storyline is that these are two schools that are like mirror images of each other right now, right? Like you said, both lost in bad, losses a couple weeks ago to unranked SEC teams, and both almost lost again to unranked teams the very next week. Tennessee needed overtime to escape Florida. Alabama needed like a miracle interception at the end of the game to beat South Carolina in the game that they trailed heading into the fourth quarter as well. And also two teams that kind of live and die by the deep ball, and the deep ball's been there more for Alabama, but it comes and goes, right? The South Carolina game, it was not there. That's why you saw that their offense is struggling a little bit in that game. So yeah, these are two schools that are very, very similar to each other right now. And why I say it's kind of like a playoff game is because they both have one loss. The loser of this game has two losses. And then the loser of this game has some really difficult games the rest of the year. Tennessee still has to play Georgia. Alabama still has LSU, among other schools. I know Missouri's on that schedule too, even though Missouri hasn't looked great, but they're still on there. I think they play Oklahoma too, and I know Oklahoma isn't great either, but they're still on that schedule. So there's a chance that like the loser of this game is still going to lose one more time after this game. And then if you have three losses, you're not making a college football playoff with three losses, in my opinion, at least. So this really is kind of a playoff game for both these schools. The winner of it should feel a lot better about their season and going forward and making the playoff. But the loser, you start to see that the playoff odds kind of take a free fall a little bit.
All right, Joseph, this is my last one. Then I'm going to let you loose here on this Alabama-Tennessee game because I know you're chomping at the bit right now. Just real quick, Max, tell us a little bit about this Alabama team and let the Tennessee fan know from a numbers analytical perspective, where is Alabama most vulnerable versus where are they most fortified when it comes to their overall team under Kalen DeBoer?
Well, fortunately for Nico in that passing game, they were the most vulnerable in the secondary. They make some. What I'll say with the Alabama secondary is that they're talented. They're very young. They have a lot of true freshmen, a lot of true sophomores playing in that secondary right now. And when you have an offensive head coach in Kalen DeBoer, not the greatest defensive coach of all time, and Nick Saban, that youth could show up a good amount, right? And you saw it in that Vanderbilt game. I mean, they really were getting cooked in that game by Diego Pavia and the Commodores, which you never thought you'd say about any Alabama secondary, right, against a Vanderbilt team. So it's a vulnerable secondary. They're very talented. And there's times in that Georgia game, too, where you can see, oh, that's the talent. That's why they're five-star recruits coming out. They have the game-stealing pick at the end of the game. But they are young, and that's an opportunity for Josh Heupel and those receivers to take advantage of it. And it could look like the Hendon Hooker Bryce Young game we had a couple years ago, which is an absolute shootout. I will say where they're very strong is that they have a great offensive line. Alabama does. And, you look at that South Carolina game. South Carolina's got one of the best D-lines in the country that's been destroying teams all year. Alabama held them in check in that game, right? So that's a very, very good offensive line. And Jalen Monroe is pretty much always going to be a really, really good deep thrower. There's sometimes where he's not, but he's mainly been a very, very good quarterback this year. So you have that. You have a great head coach in Kalen DeBoer, who's a great offensive mind as well. So I'm excited to see this matchup because I think there is an opportunity here for Alabama to take advantage of Tennessee's secondary with Ryan Williams and the other receivers they have. And the other side of the ball is an opportunity for Nico to take advantage of that Alabama secondary. Like I said, I don't know if it would be as amazing as that Bryce Young, Hendon Hooker shootout that we had a few years ago, but it could be a shootout nonetheless. And I think it would be a really, really fun game on Saturday.
Take it away, Jay.
Oh, dude, I'm pumped. I'm pumped for the third Saturday in October. Yes. I don't want to hammer it too much. I know you and Greg covered it for the most part, so I got one question for the game, and then we'll move on to some other games I want to cover. Who do you think in terms of, and I, as an unbiased viewer, I really hope this game is just the absolute shootout that it was with Bryce Young and Hendon Hooker. Who do you think, from a confidence standpoint, needs to have a better game Saturday between Jalen Milroe and Nico for in
Oh,
terms of what they want to accomplish the rest of the season?
it's got to be Nico. I think Milroe's a very, very confident kid, and he should be. He's been outstanding this year. He played amazingly against Georgia a couple weeks ago, right? So he knows he's a stud. He knows he's a superstar. Nico, thinks he could be a superstar. He has not proven to be one yet, right? So I think Nico definitely, if he has another poor showing in this one, maybe again, I'm not saying he's going to have his confidence shattered by that, but he's a young kid, right? He's a true sophomore in college right now, whereas Milroe's a little bit older. He's a senior in college, so he's got a couple years on him. Milroe knows, hey, even if I, aren't great in this game, I'm still probably going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. Nico's trying to establish himself right now. And I know Nico's a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, so everyone knew about him. But I think this is a bigger game for Nico than it is for Jalen Milroe. It's a huge game for either of them. I'm not saying it's not a big game for either of them, but I think that this is probably a little bit bigger for Nico's confidence than it is for Jalen Milroe, just because he's looked shaky this year. Whereas I won't say that about Milroe. Milroe's been really, really good this year with a couple bad showings here and there, but otherwise has been elite. Nico has not shown really much elite play at all outside of like the Kent State and Chattanooga games that we saw earlier in the year.
Yeah, and those are games that you would expect Nico to come out and sling it in. And outside, I agree with you. Outside of Jalen, maybe a couple of decisions like the safety that happened last week. It's like you just small things, but
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think Nico really needs this game. At least, even if they don't win, he needs this game to go well for him. Josh Heupel needs the win, but Nico needs the game to go well. So pivoting away from the third Saturday in October, we got to talk about the biggest game of the week, man. The Buckeyes. They went to Eugene and they came home toting an L. And Ryan Day's now 2-6. 2-6, I believe, versus AP top 5 opponents. Where does Ryan Day go from here?
It's tough, dude. It really is. He's, what I always say about Ohio State is full transparency, we put out a top 10 head coaches list before the season, and Ryan Day was like 8 or 9 on the list. And Ohio State fans, after every win they have, has always been clowning me, saying, "Oh, see, this is why Ryan Day is 2 or 3." What I'll say about Ryan Day is that job is very easy to win at Ohio State. It's one of the easiest jobs in college football to win at. Honestly, that's why it's one of the best jobs in college football. So it's not like all jobs are created equal, like it kind of is in the NFL. It's easier to win in some places in college football than it is at others. Ryan Day just hasn't done the elite stuff that you need to be considered a success at Ohio State right now. And you saw in that game against Oregon. Now, I'm not saying he got blown out, right? He only lost by 1, and honestly, save for an OPI from Jeremiah Smith, they might have won that game off of a game-winning field goal. But that's an alarming stat for an Ohio State head coach, especially when you're supposed to be a top 5 team in the country every single year, and you're consistently losing to the top 5 teams in the country every year, right? So that's an alarming stat, and that's why a lot of Ohio State fans are a little queasy right now with this amazing roster, probably one of the best rosters that's ever put together, and they're still losing to top 5 teams in the country right now. So yeah, there's some talks. There's not firing talks yet, but there are some people who are getting sick of this from Ryan Day, and he better win some big games against Penn State and, of course, against Michigan at the end of the year, and, of course, in the college football playoff and Big Ten title game, too, if they can get there. He's got to show this year especially that he can do it with this kind of roster, or else there's a lot of Ohio State boosters even. They're like, hey, we just put together a $20 million roster. We better get another coach to do better than this, right? So that's going to be an interesting talking point the rest of the year, and we'll see if he could do that against a big road game against Penn State in a few weeks.
Yeah, and if we're talking about a coach on the hot seat with a 95% win rate,
insane.
We have we have come to a whole new level in college football, man. Yeah, I win 95% of my games. Not good enough.
That's
Ohio State.
That's Ohio State, though. Yeah.
At Ohio State, that is 100%. It's you win the Big Ten, beat Michigan, play for national titles. You got 3 options. He is incredible. I'm incredible coach, but there are expectations that Ohio State has that he is not meeting. And you would think also. I think another thing that's frustrating for Buckeye fans is the way that they lost that game against Oregon. And I know there were some tweets going around that people were like, "Oh, there should have been a second left," and he slid, and it's like when Nico ran out of bounds versus Arkansas, it's like, well, it's Nico, man. He's young, started 6 games. Will Howard's been around. This man has played some football, and then the just miss by the coaching staff, not knowing that the clock was going to keep running on the penalty and bound. Like, these are things that fall on the coaching staff and they reflect on the coaching staff. And it's like, you should know these things being in the position you are, being at Ohio State. This looked very similar to the way that they ended the Rose Bowl against Utah a few years ago, where the clock wasn't totally managed correctly. They ended up leaving like 15 seconds on, and Utah got the ball back. And it's like, you could have drained that time and kicked the game-winning field goal. I know they still ended up winning the game, and what was an absolute incredible game from Jackson Smith and Jigba. But it's these small coaching decisions that lead between being 2-6 in AP top 5 games and 6-2. I mean, it's small decisions like that I think hold Ryan Day back. As great as a coach he is, and as great as a recruiter he is, these are the small things that separate you from being a national championship winning head coach. And well, you beat everybody you were supposed to beat.
Right.
So,
and listen, to Ryan Day's credit, listen, if he made that field goal, if they made that field goal against Georgia in that playoff, they would have probably destroyed TCU in the
100%.
possible national championship game. And then we could talk about a national championship winning head coach, and Ryan Day has a lot more leeway than what he does right now, right? And he's right there. We're not talking about a guy that's getting blown out of the water in all these big games. But the other thing I want to point out real quick, Will Howard, yes, that slide was bad at the end of the game. Will Howard was the best Buckeye on the field in that game too. I think he's getting a lot of flack on Twitter because of it. Ohio State had zero run game against Oregon. And that was how I thought they were going to lead the team to victory, because the Oregon run D, as we've seen before, has been a little shaky at times. Judkins had 10 carries for 23 yards. If you told me that stat line before the game, I would have said Ohio State loses the game by 20, right? Will Howard had them in that game. He played his heart out, and I think he's getting a lot of flack on Twitter for that slide, and it's a bad decision. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, he was the reason why they're in that position in the first place. So I want to give Will Howard some credit, because I thought he was the best player for Ohio State in that game, honestly.
I agree. And to play off that, Judkins only had 23 yards. Henderson, outside of the big run he had, which was, I think, 57 yards, he only had 34. So for the most part, Ohio State's run game, which was held to be a strength coming in with arguably the best running back room in the nation, was largely held in check for the most part, outside of that one big run. But I agree with you. I think one of the criticisms of Will Howard was coming into the season, they're like, Will Howard doesn't necessarily have to play quarterback. He just doesn't have to screw it up. No, Saturday he had to play quarterback. And outside of just one mistake, he did. He went out there, he was spinning it, man.
Yeah.
And to see him grow like that from what he was at Kansas State, I think is a good sign from Buckeye fans. But it's just, you're losing in the same way, man. Last second, split second decision, and you're just on the wrong side.
But that's the one saving grace for Ohio State fans after that game, is that they can go away from and be like, okay, you know what? The big question for us entering the year was, okay, when we need Will Howard to win the game, can he win the game? Now you know he is good enough to win these games. Like, he can win you these games. And if you have a run game, it's a lot better. If your secondaries and get absolutely cooked like it did against Oregon, this team could almost be unbeatable if Will Howard playing at that kind of level, right? So that's one silver lining for Ohio State fans after that loss. I know they don't want to be happy about it, but the one thing they can say is, okay, at least we know we have a quarterback that can win these big games now. And Will Howard proved that, I think, on Saturday night.
Yeah, and there's no moral victories, especially if you're Ohio State, but that is a shining light. So pivoting away from the losers and moving over to the winners, what impressed you about Dylan Gabriel, man? What did you see from him in this game that you thought he looked really good, man?
Yeah,
he looked really good. And like watching him last year, he kind of, I feel like this version of Dylan Gabriel was there, because last year in Red River, I had some questions about him when he came from UCF, and I was like, can he really like step up in a moment like this? And he balled out against Texas. And then he kind of fell off a little bit, in Kansas, and a couple of games they ended up losing to Oklahoma. But I wanted to see Dylan Gabriel kind of take that step this year with a better roster. And it felt like, to me at least, he did in that game. So what did you see from Dylan that you liked on Saturday?
Listen, I feel a lot better about my Dylan Gabriel preseason Heisman pick now than I did a few weeks ago, honestly, because he was fantastic in this game, and he was the reason. He was also, like Will Howard, he was the best player on the field for Oregon in this one. He was a guy who's throwing like 40-yard handoffs down the field, and that was really what was missing from Oregon's offense all year, was that they were they had a good offensive line. At least now, first couple weeks they were a little shaky, but now they're really good. The run game is really good with Jordan James, and the short game is really good with Dylan Gabriel always being really good at that. They were missing the deep ball. They really were missing the deep ball all year. They got it against one of the best secondaries in college football in Ohio State, and Dylan Gabriel was delivering the ball deep downfield on a dime. And the other thing too, Evan Stewart looked a lot better than he's looked all year. That was a big thing too. So if they get this offense looking like that against one of the best defenses in America, there is not a defense in the country, I think, that can really slow down this Oregon offense. It's why I thought Oregon was a national title contender, and why they are a national title contender is because, in my opinion, they have the best offense in college football entering the year, and they look like the best offense in college football, again, against an elite defense. That's not like a good Ohio State defense. That is an elite, one of the best defenses in college football, and they tore them to shreds in that game. So that is why Oregon can win a national title this year, is because of Dylan Gabriel and that offense, and they proved why they had the best offense in the country ending the year on Saturday night.
Yeah, and they did it down some product. Like, I know Trayshawn Holden's he's not Evan Stewart, and he's not Tez Johnson, but he's still productive. He's still another target. He's still, like, as far as wide receiver 3 goes, probably one of the better wide receiver 3s in college football on a roster. So you lose him early in the game on what is just the dumbest mistake ever, and he come out and he owned it. And I mad respect for Trayshawn for coming out and owning it and be like, that was me, that was dumb, be better. But to come out and do that and then still ball out, and man, I'm so glad you mentioned Evan Stewart. When he announced he was transferring from Texas A&M, I was like, oh, somebody has a chance. Somebody has a chance to get an absolute ball player. And then he was like, I'm going to Oregon. I was like, here we go. Here's how it happens. And I've been waiting on him to pop all season, man. And in the biggest moment, he was like, oh, yeah, let me remind you guys, I am an incredible wide receiver. So watching him go out and ball, I was just, small part of my heart was like really happy, because I wanted to see that for him at Texas A&M, and it just never, it never happened like that. Like, he had some crazy catches and some crazy plays, but he never got that level of production at Texas A&M. So I'm just, hats off to Evan Stewart. We knew you had it, brother. We knew you had it.
I mean,
so
injuries robbed him at A&M too, is another thing I would say. And then we finally we're seeing him fully healthy this year, and you see why he was a top 10 recruit coming out of high school, right? I mean, he is truly a very, very gifted athlete. And Denzel Burke's a guy that might be a top 50 pick in the NFL draft. He was cooking Denzel Burke all night, honestly. So it was a really impressive performance. And if you get that Evan Stewart the whole rest of the season, because I thought he was slow to start the year, that is, again, it's another reason why to be really high on this Oregon offense and this entire Oregon team going forward, honestly.
So last question before we move on to Red River, because I know Red River was kind of ugly, but I have some questions, I have some thoughts, things like that. How big was this for Dan Lanning, man?
Huge, because there's a lot of Oregon fans that were, he lost 3 times to Washington in his last 2 years there, so. There are a lot of questions over, okay, can he win the big ones, right? And this is a massive one. This is the biggest game of the year for him. And maybe even biggest game of the year for the regular season, at least in college football. 2 top 3 teams going head to head, which we haven't had before. Maybe not have all year, honestly, the way we're looking out to be right now. But yeah, this is a huge one. And this is one that he proved, hey, I'm an elite head coach. And I never doubted that. I had him as I think the 3rd best head coach in college football entering the year, which I got a lot of flack for as well. But he is an elite head coach in college football, and he showed that why in this one. So yeah, big kudos to him. This is a massive, massive game, and he proved that unlike Ryan Day, he proved that he can win the big ones right now. That's a big kudos to him for that.
Shout out my boy Dan Lanning. We miss you. Go do your thing in Oregon, but we miss you, dog.
Love him. He's the man.
So
he's the man. Yeah,
dude, his energy's infectious, man. Like watching his post game interview, and then watching Kenny Dillingham's post game interview, I was just like, man, these guys are they just get it, man. They get the sport. They get.
Dillingham learned under Dan Lanning too. Dillingham was Lanning's offensive coordinator, so clearly he learned that kind of energy from Lanning.
Oh
so yeah, man, I'm with you, man. That energy is infectious, and you could tell that Dan Lanning has it for sure.
Watching both those post game interviews, can you imagine having them in the same room?
I mean, why not? I mean, I would love to play for them. Honestly, those are 2 coaches that are just like that. They have that energy, and listen, there are other coaches that don't have the energy that are still amazing coaches, right? But that's the kind of energy that you love to play for as a player. So Dan Lanning's absolutely got that, and that's why he's a player's coach. Everyone loves him, and everyone in college football loves him. I can't find a single person who has anything bad to say about Dan Lanning. Honestly, he's a terrific coach, and what seems like a terrific leader too.
I love watching him on the sidelines too. I mean, dude just gets fired up. He reminds me of like the football version of Dan Hurley.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, just as brilliant too, which is just insane. Which is it's amazing. But
it seems up to this point that him and Oregon were a perfect marriage. So it's shout out the boy, go Ducks. But no, to pivot away to I guess what I would consider probably up to this point the most complete team. And I know the competition hasn't been there, but week in and week out, man, they've just been good. it's the Texas Longhorns.
Yeah.
They've looked good with Arch. They've looked good with Quinn. I know Quinn coming out early in that game looked a little shaky, but you kind of had to feel like he was eventually going to get it figured out. And also, listen, let's not shy away from it. We all know what the Oklahoma offense was.
Yeah.
We all know going into that game, we kind of knew how that was going to play out. Greg, we talked about it on Thursday. We're like, Oklahoma's defense, they might come out strong because it's a rivalry game and there's just, Oklahoma only fears God and Texas fears Oklahoma.
Yep.
That whole thing, like they're riding that energy, baby.
Yep.
But then you're down 5 receivers. You're starting a freshman quarterback. Like we knew this was coming, man. So what, outside of what we expected from Texas, what did you see from them that you liked on Saturday?
Honestly, just they took care of business in a lot of ways. I think what I really like to see was the Texas offensive line against what's a really good. You mentioned that the Oklahoma defense is by far the strength of this team, and specifically the strength of this entire defense is the front seven. They have an elite front seven. Oklahoma does with a defensive line and linebacker. Danny Stutzman, who's by maybe second to Dan Lanning in terms of pregame speeches, is Danny Stutzman. that guy is absolutely electric. But they have a great defense, and I said the key to this game for Oklahoma to even have a prayer at winning this game was to consistently get pressure on Quinn Ewers, and they were not able to do that because Texas has the best offensive line in college football, the best, not one of the best, the best in college football. This is another game they did against Michigan as well. That Texas offensive line dominated what is one of the best defensive lines in college football with maybe a top 5 pick in Mason Graham, a first round pick in Kenneth Grant, Josiah Stewart, who looks like the best defensive player in college football so far this year. They dominated Michigan in that game, and they dominated Oklahoma in this game as well. Calvin Banks Jr., the left tackle, looks like an All-American player right now. Cameron Williams at right tackle is right now a top 20 prospect in the draft, according to our big board. So Texas has not one but 2 guys that's probably going to go first round in the NFL draft at offensive tackle. This offensive line is disgustingly good, and I understand that Ewers gets a lot of love. The receivers get a lot of love with Isaiah Bond being an elite player as well, and they deserve it. Don't get me wrong. They have an elite offense outside of the offensive line, but this is not possible unless you have that kind of offensive line protecting you. And, that Texas offensive line, for me at least, is by far the most impressive part of that win for against Oklahoma.
I agreed, and they look good. And one thing that kind of stuck out to me was specifically with the skill players. I guess I'll pivot off since you chose the offensive line. They don't look selfish. The skill players don't look selfish. They look like, if I get the ball, then I get the ball. But if I don't, it's for the team. Like watching Ryan Wingo get the ball, who's just a freshman who has come on strong for Texas early, and watching Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden and Silas Bolden, it's like they don't look selfish. It doesn't look like there's a diva in the receiver room that's like, I have to get the ball, I have to make the plays, it's on me. And in a year where you lose running backs, you lose your number 1 running back, and you think you're kind of thin at that position, some guys step up, and then watching them just move the ball down the field, they're just good, man. They're so good, and it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch them not be selfish. It's fun to watch them let this freshman come on, let him get these jet sweeps, blocking down the field looks really good. I'm impressed, man. I'm impressed with their skill players as a whole.
So am I, and I think that's a great point by you, and because they know they're playing for something bigger right now, honestly, and they know winning is a tie that raises all boats, right? If you win, everyone's taken care of, right? Don't worry about the NFL draft. Don't worry about anything else. If you keep winning and you win it all, everyone will be taken care of at the end of the year. Every national champion always has a ton of guys get drafted to the NFL right after that, right? Yep. So you don't got to worry about that, So I think they all know. Hey, we're playing we're not playing for stats right now. We are playing for a national title, and you can see that all of them. And when they are given the opportunities, they are capitalizing on them as well. So it's a great point by you, honestly, because they are a very selfless team. And I think a big reason for that is that they know what they have in that locker room. They know, hey, this locker room that we have is probably better than any other locker room in college football right now. If we just keep on it and don't get selfish, we could probably beat anyone in the country and maybe bring the school their first national title since 2005, probably. Vince Young title, I believe, was the last one. So 20 years almost, which is a long time for that program. They know what they have in that locker room right now, and that's why they're also selfless out there, honestly.
Agreed. One of the greatest calls in college football. Going to the corner.
Yep.
Oh God, dude, I love it, man. I love it. Every time that replay comes up, I'm just like, I remember
tough.
exactly where I was watching that Rose Bowl.
And one more thing on the selfless part, because I just thought about this. They have a backup
Yep.
quarterback who's a top 10 to 15 quarterback in college football, and he has no inkling that he wants to start right now. That could be a situation that blows up in any other program that, oh my God, you have this superstar backup who everyone knows is ready for the reins and ready to be a superstar, but you also have a superstar starter. That could be in a situation that just blows up anywhere else. Arch Manning, and credit to him, I think this is how he was raised too, with his uncles being very selfless players too. He's like, nope, this is not my year. This is Quinn's time. I'll fill in if he gets hurt, but I'm not the starter. They even said when he was balling out and everyone's trying to make it a controversy, everyone was like, nope, this is Quinn's team. Even Arch and his family, like, nope, this is Quinn's team this year. So yeah, the receivers are very selfless too, but I think the most selfless player in that locker room is Arch Manning, because by all accounts, he legit might be a top 15 quarterback in the country, and he is very content to just be a backup this year and then take the reins next year. So shout out to him, because that's a situation that in today's world of NIL and the transfer portal, all that, there are a lot of guys in his shoes that would not be there right now, or would be making this all about them. And Arch Manning has probably been the most selfless player. It's a lot like Jalen Hurts at Alabama, in my opinion, when he was very selfless and sitting behind Tua after it was his team. I think Arch Manning, is the most selfless player in college football right now.
Yeah. And dude, to watch that happen at Texas and watch the way that they're all handling it as a team. And then we watched it happen last year. Oklahoma ran off Dylan Gabriel. They're like, we want Jackson Arnold. Kansas State ran off Will Howard. They're like, we want Avery Johnson. Both those teams don't seem to be better off choosing their backups. So could you imagine if, and I know Arch is a better than, I'll say Arch has been better than Jackson Arnold and Avery Johnson. So, take that for what it is. But
Avery's been okay.
These are teams,
Avery beat Colorado.
He's been all right. He's been all right, man. He's been just all right. But that team was better.
Jackson
Will
Arnold,
Howard?
He's been better than he's been better than Jackson Arnold. Jackson Arnold.
Yeah, and that's fair, but they didn't run off Jackson Arnold to start Avery Johnson. They ran off Will Howard, who balled out against Oregon's defense. So I mean, it's like to watch what's going on at Texas and be like, we don't want to end up like them. So we're just going to handle this in house. It speaks about their culture and the culture that Sark's built, man. And Texas is just, they're on a roll, and it seems like as long as Sark's there, they're gonna continue on a roll. So.
Definitely. Yeah, and Arch Manning is probably going to enter. It's so weird because Arch Manning is going to enter the summer probably, hopefully, Quinn Ewers not suffering any more injuries, because that's been an issue with him his whole career. But if he doesn't get any more injuries, Arch Manning will enter the summer with like 2 or 3 career starts, and I'll still say he's the best prospect in next year's draft, probably, right? Which is something that you never thought you would say about a guy like that, but it's just like, nope, that's the guy next year. Like, we all know already. So it's a very funny situation to look at, that next year's top quarterback is a guy that's never really been a full-time starter before. But that's just kind of what Texas has in that locker room right now. Is pretty. I think. Listen, if Quinn's out for the entire year for something, and hopefully it never happens, knock on wood, I still think Texas is probably the best chance to win the national title, because Arch Manning's almost just as good, right? So they have not one but 2 quarterbacks that I feel comfortable saying that they can win a national title with that quarterback, that's an insane thing for any program to have, honestly. So shout out to that program, man, because they're really doing it the best way to anyone, it seems like, right now.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, at this point in time in college football with the transfer portal and NIL and everything, to have that is just wild. So, last thing with Texas, before we move on, I gotta ask. So early lean for Georgia, Texas. Where's your head out? Who are you thinking?
I'm going. Unfortunately for you, I'm going Texas. It's at Texas.
Okay.
I think it'll be a great game. But the more I preview it, the more I look into it, and we're doing our preview show tomorrow. We're going to dive really headfirst into it. But I just not a lot of on-field reasons for me to pick Georgia. I do think they have a better coach in Kirby Smart, even though Steve Sarkisian has proven to be one of the elite coaches in college football, and maybe will be close to that tier of Kirby at the end of the year. But Kirby is still the best. He's still the king. And then they might have the better quarterback too, of course, Beck. Beck has been Superman the last 10 quarters or so, over the last 2.5 games. So yeah, he's been great. But unless Beck is just Superman again, Texas's pass defense might be the best in the country right now, the way they're playing. I know they haven't really played a passing game quite like Carson Beck yet, but at the same time, they're playing lights out football. Unless he's absolutely Superman, I struggle to see how Georgia offensively is going to do enough to win this game. So I think Texas is going to win. It'll be a great game, though. I'm not saying it'll be a blowout by any means, but I struggle. Besides saying, "Oh, Beck's going to be Superman," why I would pick Georgia in this game.
I agree, and for a lot of the same reasons, I kind of agree. I was leaning more towards Texas, but I just wanted to get your thoughts, is because I try to take my biases out as a fan and actually look at a game and look at how it's supposed to be. And so I just wanted to see if you felt the same way. So
Yeah. That would
cool.
be a great
Well,
one, though. I'm excited for it.
it is. I hope it's better than the Bama game started. So that's the most I hope for, is just don't put us in a 28-point hole. Don't do that to me again. We're good.
I want that finish, though. I want the same finish. We can get the same things. That was one of the craziest games of all time, honestly. So I hope we get the same kind of finish in that one.
If it's wire to wire with that finish, I'll take it. But as a dog fan, I don't know if I could take another 28-point deficit.
Maybe not for your cholesterol. Maybe not for your cholesterol specifically, and any other Texas and Georgia fans specifically. They probably don't want that kind of game. But for any other fan of college football, that we are desperately hoping to get that kind of amazing game on Saturday.
Just eat it up. Well, there was one last game in our core 4 game that we didn't get, and it was a man. It's a lot of voodoo. It's Louisiana. It's Baton Rouge at night, man. LSU in a game that they didn't lead in until they won it. Somehow manages to beat Ole Miss in overtime. What were your thoughts? What did you think? How do you feel about Ole Miss after they just essentially threw this one away?
Yeah, man, Lane Kiffin. This offense is by no means the most creative offense in the country, like it always is under Lane Kiffin. I mean, this offense is so predictable right now. That is something that was my big takeaway, is that and Jackson Dart too. This is not only a Lane thing. This is a Jackson Dart thing. There are one read system, and it's the first read or it's nothing. Honestly, it seems like right now with Trey Harris, who is basically getting all of the targets, and then when he gets hurt, they go to Caden Lee, and he gets all the targets, right? So it's not even like they have this one alpha receiver. It's understandable when it's like Arizona, when they have really one great receiver in Tetro or McMillan. Ole Miss has Caden Lee, who's really good. Trey Harris, who might be the Blitnikoff favorite right now, the way he's playing. But also that's partly due to him getting every single target. But you also have Juice Wells, who's done nothing this year. And you have Caden Prescorn at tight end, who I thought was one of the best tight ends in America. He's really done nothing this year either, too. So it's a very questionable thing that's going on right now. Is like, why is this an offense that is so predicated on one receiver at all times? Even when the top guy goes down, it's still one receiver. That's an issue right now, and they have a big issue offensively, and they are very vanilla, it looks like, offensively right now, which is something that I thought I would never say about a Lane Kiffin offense. So yeah, that's an issue for Ole Miss right now, and they pretty much have to win out the rest of the year in order to make the playoff, and we'll see if they can do that, because they do play Georgia left on their schedule too. But yeah, it's a worrying sign for that Ole Miss. The Ole Miss defense is the one keeping them in games right now, which again is nothing. It's something I never thought I would say about a Lane Kiffin coach team either. So that defense is the one that's keeping them in games. They got to figure this thing out offensively right now, because they have some serious issues.
Yeah, and Jackson Dart was sacked 6 times. 6 times, man. Like, is this? It feels like Lane Kiffin just like he'll have all these weapons, and then the O-line's just like suspect again. No, that's it. For whatever reason.
That's why when I was saying best offense in college football preseason, it was like, okay, is it Oregon or is it Ole Miss? And the thing that was the deciding factor for me is like, okay, Oregon and Ole Miss are very comparable in terms of quarterbacks, in terms of run games, in terms of receiving cores. Oregon has a clear advantage at offensive line. Ole Miss has not had a good offensive line in a long time, it feels like, honestly. It's an issue. And Lane does a great job in the portal and does a pretty good job in recruiting. He's not getting the big boys up front right now. That's an issue for them as well. So, yeah, that's a big issue. And 6 sacks, Harold Perkins is not playing in that game either, right? You take away your best pass rusher for LSU, and they're still getting 6 sacks in Jackson Dart. So that offensive line is a serious problem right now, and that's another reason to be a little pessimistic about that offense turning around.
Yeah, it's just rough, man. And in Harold Perkins' absence, his name was it Whit?
Whit Weeks, yeah.
Whit Weeks, yeah, dude, stepped up like an unbelievable dude. Was headhunting all night, and questionable targeting call. I'm glad he didn't get thrown out. Like, I'm all for the flag. You want to throw the flag? Throw the flag. Can we stop kicking kids out of football games?
Dude, that's it's my least favorite rule in college football right now is throwing the kids out of the game unless it's something egregious. Like, I understand like throwing trash on holding out for spitting on a player. Like, throw them out of the game. But like a normal targeting where it's like, and we're getting targeting for a lot of things nowadays, where it's like a normal hit and like 10 years ago. Like, it's just, I understand the 15-yard penalty. You want to improve the safety of the game, but throwing a kid out of a game, especially a big game like that, I hate that. I hate that. So I'm with you. The ejection on top of the 15 yards is the worst rule in college football right now.
Yeah. Like, if it's blatantly egregious, or if we have somebody who's like a multiple time offender,
Yeah.
I'm fine with it. Like then at that point, it's like, all right, dude, you gotta reel it in. But like one time on a hit, and I mean, I don't know, man. People ball carrier goes down, tucks his head. There's so many variables. There's so many things that just go into a hit like that, and it's so bang bang, it's so fast. And I know watching a replay, you're like, he had plenty of time to react. It's like go back and watch the full speed, and you
Yeah.
tell
Yeah.
me
Oh yeah.
if he had time to react. Like I don't think you understand how fast. It's like watching track. You don't realize
Mhm.
how fast these guys are moving.
Yep. Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm with that, man. It's the worst rule in college football right now, in my opinion, or one of
Yeah.
the worst rules. There's a lot of them, but it's one of the worst rules in college football that you just have targeting that these kids get kicked out of the game for it, and it's awful. So yeah, it's terrible.
I would love to do a
Well, moving on
podcast with
to
Max just about all of the worst rules in his opinion of college football.
We'd be on for like multiple hours probably because there is a lot to change. There's a lot to change in college football right now, but
inconsistent pass interference calls, inconsistent roughing the passer calls,
yep.
targeting is how like its own episode. I
Yeah.
mean, I just
Yeah.
like ineligible man downfield is the most inconsistently called penalty in the game. Like I just, whatever. Anyways,
Yep.
moving on from that and moving on to the winners. So LSU, kind of a bit of a resurgence after that game to USC. They are 5-1 on the season. What do you think about LSU going this far? Garrett Nussmeier and the boys, Kyron Lacey called his shot. If you guys didn't see the Barstool LSU clip, called his shot on that touchdown. The audacity, man. I love it. I love the confidence. But talk to me about LSU,
The
Max.
Raging
What are you
Cajun,
thinking? How do you feel? I do.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's
my
something.
boy.
And it's like this, but this is what LSU is, man. Like every year, the talent's there. They've got it just like they're just plucking these dudes out of the ground. They're just like, yep, this kid's gonna be an absolute stud in the NFL. Where'd he come from? Somewhere in Louisiana. We don't know, but he's
Yeah.
gonna be a stud. And then it just like if it's not one thing, it's another. And this I don't know. LSU year in and year out feels like they should be a national title contender, and they're just not. But that aside, I'm sorry, get off my LSU soapbox. They're 5-1. Things look good this year. We've seen Bama be vulnerable, so you got to be feeling good about that if you're an LSU fan. Talk to me about LSU. What do you like? What do you don't like about this Ole Miss game? How do you feel about them moving forward?
Well, the reason why they weren't a national title contender last year, even though they had the best offense in college football, they really did have the best offense in the country, was because the defense was that bad. And we thought that was going to be the reason why they held them back this year. It actually was the reason why they won this game against Ole Miss. The pass defense was really, really good. They really excelled. Had like an over 80 grade in coverage. They were 87th in the country in coverage grade entering the week, right? So only allowed like 7 yards per pass against Ole Miss. An Ole Miss team that takes shots downfield, so only 7 yards per pass is really, really good. Again, like I said, six sacks, another 6 QB hits, 23 pressures on Jackson Dart. The reason why they won this game was the pass defense that we thought would be a weakness of this team, especially with Howard Perkins tearing his ACL, even bigger weakness, and they really stepped up in this game. So, yeah, the offense is really good. Kyron Lacey, amazing touchdown grab at the end, especially when I thought Kyron Lacey's season was over a little bit earlier in that game. He suffered what looked like a really bad knee injury and then somehow came back out after that and scored the game-winning touchdown. So, thankfully, he's not seriously hurt. But, yeah, amazing game by LSU on both sides. But I really think the most impressive part of that game was the LSU pass defense shutting down what should be an elite Ole Miss passing offense.
Yeah, and it's a good sign if you're a Tiger fan, because that was obviously, like you said, that was the biggest question coming in. Is it was like, how good is this defense going to be? Because this is what we need. We need good corner play. We need good secondary play. We need a good D line. Like, and they found some guys that have made some plays. So, got to be looking up if you're a Tiger fan. But that covers our core four for the week. So we'll kind of open it up a little bit. Get national. Find some games we like. Have some questions. I know Greg has some questions you want to ask. So, Greg, I feel bad. We kind of monopolize that a little bit, but college football nerds over here. So if you want to start us off with some just general questions in the state of college football, go ahead, man.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no problem. You ask away. This is more your realm than it is mine. So I love just like sitting back and listening to you, Max, just go at it. But one of my big questions that I was kind of sitting here thinking about on Monday was, who, in your opinion, Max, is the biggest fraud in the SEC right now? Is it in fact Ole Miss that you were just talking about, or do you see it as somebody else the way that you've seen everybody play so far this season?
Yeah, Ole Miss has problems. I think it might be Missouri. Actually, I'll go with Oklahoma. Oklahoma, everyone thought they were going to be really good this year. They have. I knew this going into the year. Their offense has serious issues, and this is before all the quarterback drama. But The receiving core is banged up, I will say, but the receiving core has been playing really bad. The offensive line is really bad too. This Oklahoma offense does not give them the chance to win any big game right now. And I mean, we're talking about an Oklahoma team that has a really hard rest of the schedule. They might not make a bowl game. Really, I think that's a legit thing you could talk about right now. So, yeah, it's brutal when you look at that Oklahoma offense right now. And right now, it's the worst in the Power Four in terms of EPA per play, which is basically how efficient you are. Yeah, it's brutal. So I think Oklahoma is probably the biggest fraud. I think everyone kind of knows it right now. Missouri's had their own issues offensively too that I thought was going to be an elite offense. It makes no sense how they're this bad offensively. But yeah, I think Oklahoma for me is just like, yeah, they can't win. They cannot win with that offense right now. Again, in a big game at least. So that's probably the biggest fraud I would say in the SEC right now.
I guess I'll stick in the SEC and I'll talk. Joseph, you can go next after this one, but
For sure.
we've seen some fun games. Diego Pavia is quickly becoming one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch, along with Cam Ward in college football right now. How for real is Vandy, and should Tennessee fans be legitimately scared or concerned about that game at the end of the year?
Yeah, good question. That's a good question. They're definitely better than what we thought they were going into the year. I think Vandy probably is like a 7-5 team if I had to make a prediction right now what they're going to finish up at the end of the year. This is still a team that Tennessee should beat, but this is not a team that you can just take lightly anymore, right? There's a lot of times in previous years where you can look at Vanderbilt and be like, oh, okay, we can just put our B squad out there and still win that game. Not anymore, right? Diego Pavia, Eli Stowers, the tight end, has been great as well. They are really turning this thing around right now. So, yeah, Vandy's 7-5 for Vandy is like winning a national title in almost anywhere on the program right now, it feels like, right? So that's an amazing year for them. They're really saving Clarkley's job, the head coach, and credit to him, he's done a great job as well. But yeah, Vandy's definitely not a program to take lightly anymore. Now they're about an average team in college football, when before we're talking about them as one of the worst teams in college football.
Jay?
Shout out the doors, baby. Shout out the doors. You don't want you don't want this. You don't want the smoke. You don't want Diego Pavia and the doors to come knocking on your door.
Sure don't.
Sorry. I can't. Dude, it's so good. It's so much fun. And so good for Vandy, man. But there's a team I want to talk about that I don't know, they feel inevitable to make the playoff. As much as I didn't want to be a hater, but I'm kind of being a hater. Is Notre Dame making the playoff inevitable?
They got to win out. I don't think a 10-2 Notre Dame can get in with that schedule. So they got to win out. And they have USC on the schedule at USC. And I think USC, I know they're 3-3, but they're the best 3-3 team in the country. I mean, they're playing everyone close right now. I think, and they got Army and Navy too. That's not a game to take lightly either. Army and Navy are both undefeated right now.
Service Academy's ranked, baby.
Right. I would say they probably get in and make the playoff, but they don't have an easy schedule. I mean, even Georgia Tech this week, they can lose to Georgia Tech this weekend as well, right? So there's really, it's funny enough, you look at their schedule, the easiest game by far is Florida State, when we thought that would be one of the hardest games for Notre Dame, maybe even the hardest game entering the year, because they got Georgia Tech, they got Navy, they got Virginia, who's played a lot better this year as well. They got Army, and they got USC outside of the Florida State game. So they can lose any one of those games. And like I said, if they lose any one of those games, they probably won't make the playoffs. So they got to win out. They probably are better than every team they play, though. So I think they'll do it. But it's a tightrope act right now for Notre Dame for sure.
I will say that they have my UConn Huskies nipping at their heels in the independent standings at 4-2.
There you go. Yeah, they do. Yeah,
hold it down for the independents, baby. They did also, on a sad note, they did lose Benjamin Morrison for the season, which is a huge loss.
Huge loss. That's a massive loss. Yeah.
One of the best corners in the nation. One of the best corners in the nation. So that's tough for Notre Dame. There is a game I did want to talk about. I meant to bring this up sooner, but you guys brought up USC. Man, Penn State. Is Penn State for real? Is Penn State? Are they not typical? Because typical Penn State loses that game. Down 20-6. You're flying out to LA. All of your goals are in front of you. This is the perfect time for Penn State to just drop the ball. And I mean, don't get me wrong, man.
They almost did.
But they had one man. They had one man that said, "You know what? We're not going to lose." And that man's Tyler Warren.
Yep.
And he put up a full season's worth of tight end stats in one game.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
One game, dude. 200, over 200 yards, 17 receptions, and a touchdown as a tight end. Is Penn State
Insane.
legit?
I'm gonna say no, only because I don't want to jinx my favorite team growing up. So I think that they are for legit though, and I know I say this every year as a Penn State fan, and I always get heartbroken by the end of it, but they look legit right now. So yeah, it's really encouraging, and I think the biggest catalyst for it, other than Tyler Warren being the best tight end in America right now, is Andy Kotelnicki, this offensive coordinator came in. He has revolutionized this Penn State offense in ways that I'd never seen before as a Penn State fan, right? So really, really encouraging sign when they had serious questions offensively and they're really playing above their weight class right now. They can win games because of their offense now, which is something we did not think we could say about a Penn State team in the last few years. Honestly, it's been all about the elite defense, and the offense has been good enough. Now it's no, you got an offense that can really compete right now. So Andy Kotelnicki might win the Broyles Award as the best assistant coach in college football, and might only be a 1-year thing for Penn State. He might be a head coach next year, the way he's coaching right now. But they are a legit team. We'll see that November 2nd game at Ohio State. I'm actually going to that game. I'm very excited about it. But that's gonna be a huge one. And but yeah, as of right now, Penn State looks like a legitimate team. I don't know if I would say that they're really gonna win a national title. I don't know if they can do that just yet. But I think that they are definitely. I mean, right now they're an undefeated team, and they have a pretty easy schedule the rest of the way. They already got rid of a lot of their harder games with Illinois and USC. Even if they lose to Ohio State, they're pretty much making the playoff as long as they don't lose another game the rest of the year. I think Penn State is in a really good spot. And honestly, out of all the teams in the country, it sounds weird, Penn State might have the best chance of making the playoff right now, and if anyone, just because of their easy schedule the rest of the year and the fact that they can still lose one more time and still make the playoff.
Yeah, and that, I mean, really all you need for the most part for Penn State is to have one game where you really get up for the game, and it's Ohio State. And then you should just theoretically walk. I know not every Saturday is a given, but you should theoretically walk your way to 12-0 if you manage to get up and somehow pull off that upset, which I don't even want to see Buckeye Twitter if that manages to happen. That's just gonna be a disaster. So, yeah,
they might not get out of State College with his job if they lose that game. Honestly,
they might leave him. I mean, we might have a Lane Kiffin on the tarmac kind of situation. They might just leave him sitting out there.
They'll give him the Michigan game too, but if he loses that Michigan, there's not only he's not losing that Michigan.
There's no way.
But there's if he loses that game against that quarterback situation in Michigan, that's a he might not coach the playoff. Yeah, exactly.
They would ship him to Canada. They would ship him to Canada. Be like, yeah, no, go coach Canadian Football League. Like,
right.
You are not made for this job anymore.
That would
all right. Well,
that'd be rough.
The last one, Max, that I have that I'll ask is, if you're looking at the top 10 right now, and I know some teams have recently snuck in there. Tennessee just fell out. LSU's back in. Iowa State, Clemson has found their way back in there with some solid weeks here. But who do you believe in the least in the top 10? Or you can say top 5 if you want to narrow it down to those top really elite teams, because obviously some of the, I guess the 6 through 10, there's some easier teams there to not believe in, like an Iowa State or a Clemson, that they're legitimate contenders. So let's go top 5 instead. Out of the top 5 right now, who do you believe in the least?
That's a very good very good question. I think, man,
I know you don't want to say Penn State.
No, I think it is. I really think it is. I think it is Penn State, unfortunately for me. I really do think it is. I think their offense. I think their offense still is so predicated on one player right now in Tyler Warren, who's amazing. But I think Drew Allar's very, very good. They still have issues in that offensive line. The defense has come and go a little bit, right? They allowed 13 yards per carry to USC in the first half. They figured it out in the second half. Don't get me wrong. But I think Penn State, you look at the rosters for all these teams, and Penn State, for me, out of the top 5 at least, is pretty clearly 5th out of those top 5 right now. So I'll go with Penn State to not be. But I still, like I said, they're still making the playoff, in my opinion. The one other thing I want to just get out off my chest, Clemson being 10 is a travesty. I don't understand how the heck they moved up this far. I mean, what they've done this year, they lost by 30 to Georgia. The rest of their wins, they have 5 wins this year. They have not beaten a team that even has a 500 record so far this year. Every team they've beaten is below 500 right now. I don't know how the heck they are above BYU or other schools that are undefeated right now with really good resumes. I know we're not at the fully point where we're like, oh, yeah, it's all about resumes. We need to be close to that point, yeah. And I think Clemson's resume, I wouldn't even put Clemson in the top 15 right now with that resume right now. So I don't understand how they're top 10. That to me is baffling. So I just want to get that off my chest. I don't think Clemson should be even close to the top 10 with their
I'm with
resume
you.
right now.
I love
I'm
it.
with you.
I love it. Let them have it. They really haven't. Their resumes it's rough. It is
They
rough.
beat nobody. They haven't beat anyone yet.
Yeah.
I mean, they legit, the best team they beat was a 3-4 NC State. Like, I understand what we're talking about. And they lost by 30. It's not like they played close to Georgia. Like, I was telling my brother last night, I was like, dude, we're ranking Clemson top 10 just for simply scheduling Georgia, for being brave enough to schedule Georgia. Like, okay, we'll put you top 10 for doing that. They got blown out of that game, right? So it's like, I don't understand. They're a very good team. I think they can be a good team down the line. And if they keep winning, they should move up. But this seems very, very premature right now for Clemson, in my opinion.
I feel it. Well, last one for me. I mean, I've got several more, but for time constraints and sakes, I'll make this my last one. And it is, I'm glad you brought up BYU, because the Big 12, they're going to get one of these teams in. So right now we have BYU and Iowa State that are sitting towards the top of the Big 12. I know Kansas State's, they've got one loss, so they're kind of still in the race. But how are you feeling about BYU, and how are you feeling about Iowa State? What do you make of these teams? I know Iowa State's creeping to the top 10. They're sitting at, what were they, 11th, I think?
Well, they're not. They're 9
roughly
right now. They're in the top 10.
9 right now.
Yeah.
So if we were, I know you kept it in the top 5, but we were talking about top 10 teams we don't feel good about. Chalk me up for Iowa State, because much as I love Matt Campbell, shout out to the Cyclones. Eventually, you're gonna turn into a pumpkin. Eventually, so.
Yeah. It's the conference too that I just think is going to capitalize itself, right? So I think this is just a conference that you can take your pick of who you think is going to win that conference right now. Iowa State's been great. I don't think it should be above BYU in the ranking, though. I think BYU, resume-wise, is like one of the 2 or 3 best resumes in the country, right? They beat Kansas State, who's still a top 20 team in the country. They beat them by 29 points. They beat SMU, who right now is ranked in the top 25. They beat them as well. BYU should be in the top 10, in my opinion, because of what their resume is. Now, is BYU a top 10 team in the country? I do not think that. But I think the resume-wise, they deserve to be in the top 10, which I think at this point of the year, we're now midway through the season. We got to be ranking off resumes for the most part, in my opinion. So that's why I put them. I think I had both of them in my top 10. That just came out today, actually. But yeah, Iowa State, BYU, and that Big 12. There's other schools. Kansas State, still a really, really good team. I think they could definitely win that Big 12 title. That's the most wide open conference in college football by a mile, in my opinion. So there's a lot of teams. I still think Colorado's in it. I still think Colorado could beat any of these teams in the Big 12. We'll see how they do the rest of the year. But yeah, I think Colorado's absolutely still on discussion for the Big 12 title. I mean, Texas Tech has looked good. Arizona State has looked good. Utah did look good. Cam Rising's probably gonna be out the whole year now, though, so I don't think they're really in the running anymore. But yeah, that Big 12, is absolutely incredible right now, and I think it's so incredible that they probably will only get one team in the playoff because they're just gonna beat up on each other. So yeah, it's gonna be a really, really fun race to see who first of all, who gets into that game, and then second of all, who can clinch that playoff spot, and probably the only playoff spot to come from that conference.
It's going to be wild if BYU ends up as a 4 seed.
Insane.
It's just like,
for a school
I'm
that
not
we
gonna
thought would
know.
go 4-8, to be a 4 seed
it's like,
is awesome. It's just so cool.
Yeah. It's like, joke's on you
Gotta
guys.
love.
First round bye.
Yep.
Gotta love
Absolutely.
college football. Certainly do.
Incredible.
Max Chadwick again, the host of the college football show over on Pro Football Focus. He's a PFF analyst as well. Find all of his stuff. Get the show wherever you get your podcasts and whatnot. Max, we love having you. Find him on his new Twitter account as well, as you see if you're watching the video version of the show, at CFB Max Chadwick. Always great chopping it up with you when it comes to college football. We really, really appreciate you taking the time. I know kept you for an hour, but we really do appreciate how generous you always are with your time.
Of course, I always love coming out with you guys. I was telling them before. So yeah, anytime you want to be on, anytime, man. I always have a blast talking to you guys. So
hell yeah, let's do it. Joseph, appreciate all the college football knowledge that you bring as well, because this show would certainly not be as good if it were just me and Max talking.
So kind. I'm just
Max,
a
I
junkie.
appreciate it,
Listen.
man.
thank you guys.
Thanks so much.